Hello everyone. Today I'm going to show you a walkthrough video of how I recreated the titles from the Netflix show You. So, first we're going to add our text. I've just used this random serif font, and I'm going to add some effects later to make those jagged edges like the original, but we won't worry about that yet. Once I added the text and made it this light grey colour, I duplicated it and made that to a dark red colour. Here, the top grey layer is effectively going to transition to the layer below. And to achieve this, we're going to add the choker effect to the top grey layer. The choker effect is quite self-explanatory if you play around with it. And to achieve this, we're going to keyframe the choke matte parameter. To make this look a bit more interesting and a bit more like blood, we're going to add the roughen edges effect to our grey layer with the choker on it. We can get some really nice results here if we play around with some of the parameters. I've set the type to roughen, put the border up as well as the scale until I found something that looked quite good. You'll notice this makes the grey extend out further than the original text, and we can stop this by going to toggle switches and selecting this little square preserve underline transparency button, and this will make sure it stays within the bounds of the layers below it. You'll see that if we play this back with the keyframes on the choke map that it creates this effect, but I think we can make it look a bit better. So I'm going to duplicate this grey layer but remove the effects and then put that to the bottom. This is because we're going to be playing around with the red layer above it and we don't want any gaps. I've then created another duplicate text layer and put that above our red layer. You'll see I've called this noise. To our noise layer I'm going to add the turbulent noise effect and change the type to terrain. I've then upped the contrast quite high as this is going to be a luma matte, so black values will become transparent and white values will be solid. And we're using this to enhance that blood effect. I played around with the parameters and then keyframed the brightness to go from white to black till you get something that looks quite good. On our red text layer, which should be below the noise, select Luma Matte or Luma Inverted Matte if you didn't get what you expected. Without our choker layer, this actually looks quite good on its own, but the choker layer makes it look like it's coming in from the edges, and I think both work together nicely to give us a good effect. This next step you don't have to do, but I've just pick whipped the source text layers to the top layer's source text, and this means that if you change the text of the top layer, all the layers will change as well. Okay, so we're getting somewhere now, but it doesn't look amazing just yet. So I've pre-comp our layers and just called this U. The first effect we're going to add here is the bevel alpha effect. You can see what this does. It makes it look a little bit 3D by adding a beveled edge, and I've set the light to 180 degrees so that it looks like it's coming from below. Next I've added our trusty friend roughen edges again, and I've played around with it till I get something that looks pretty good. I've also added the turbulent noise effect again to replicate that subtle grain look which is in the original by scaling the noise right down and also turning the opacity quite low and setting the blend mode to overlay. Okay, looking pretty good now. I've then replicated those weird shapes that are on the original font by simply adding some shape layers with the pen tool and made sure they're all in the same layer. To make the bottom half of these shape layers blurry and not the top, you're going to want to draw a mask over the part you want to be blurry, and you can feather it as much as you like. Then add your blur to the shape layer, and under effects and compositing options, press the plus sign and choose the mask you've made. This will apply the effect only to the mask, and you can invert the mask if you wanted it just on the other side. I've then changed the blending mode to overlay and pick whip this to the U layer so that if we move that, they'll move together. Next I've added a black solid for the background and an adjustment layer on top of all the layers, which is what we're going to add the lens flare transition to. I've added the lens flare effect and then keyframed its brightness to go from fully white on the screen to nothing. And I've also keyframed the flare to move slightly as well. There's probably some plugin where you can get a more accurate lens flare to the original, but I think this one works fine. I've also added a blur to the adjustment layer and made it so it goes from blurry to not blurry as the flare becomes less bright. Next I've keyframed the scale of the U text so it comes slightly towards the camera, and keeping things subtle here usually looks the nicest. Often we want everyone to notice all these effects we've added, but most of the time they look best when used subtly and nothing too over the top. The next effect we're going to add is a light sweep to create that underlit effect. I've made the light a red colour and made it 90 degrees. Then I've keyframed it to come up from below. I've also done that for the top right corner of the U as well. Finally, we're going to add a little something to the background. As the light comes on the text, this is shown in the background of the original as well. So I've added a circle and added loads of blur to it and then turned down the opacity. I've then keyframed it to appear as the text turns red, and again keeping this quite subtle, looks quite nice. I then added some little dust specks with some more blurred circles and keyframed their position and opacity too. And that's pretty much it. Yet again, we can go back in, change that top text layer to whatever we want, and it will change on all the layers, and all the effects we've applied will update as well. The only thing is those manual shapes that we added to the font, but they didn't take too long to create. So yeah, that's it. I hope you found this useful or interesting. As I said before, I intend to do some more of these videos breaking down famous animations, so subscribe for that if you haven't already. And let me know below if you have any ideas for anything you want to see. You can also follow my Instagram. Thank you, and see you in the next one.